On the 1st of October, our church celebrates the feast of Saint John of Albania. The following are some thoughts on his life and works. Born in the 12th century in a province of Albania, John's exceptionally fine voice brought him to the Royal Academy of Music in Constantinople. There his natural talent was trained by teachers who marvelled at the clarity and brilliance of his tone and brought him to the attention of the emperor himself. He was summoned to the royal palace to perform for the emperor. John's magnificent voice held the sophisticated audience in hushed reverence, and he was invited to share dinner with the royal household. When asked what was his favourite dish, John replied that he was partial to beans and peas, which brought on some good-natured laughter, and for which he was dubbed John Kukuzelis, which means beans and peas. John was in much demand for the beauty of his voice, and with the emperor as his patron, great things lay in store for him. He became a man of great importance and interest throughout the city, because his artistry was one of the greatest of all time. The admiration of his music lovers who flocked to see him failed to bring him a sense of fulfillment. He felt that there was something lacking in his purpose. No doubt John had many hymns of faith in his repertoire, and soon he found himself longing to get away from the crowds in order to find the solitude where he might draw nearer to God, rather than just singing about him in the multitudes. After a chance meeting with an abbot of Mount Athos, who had been visiting Constantinople, and who described the serenity to be found on the holy mountain, John made up his mind to leave the clamorous city. Fearing he would offend the emperor, who had so graciously sponsored him, he chose to slip out unnoticed and simply vanished, telling no one of his whereabouts. He was received incognito at the monastery of the Great Lavra, where the monks accepted him as a shepherd, and where he assumed the duties of a novice. Unrecognized in his cloister, it was all he could do to refrain from joyfully singing, which would have revealed his identity. With his true identity a secret, he tended the flocks on the mountainside, while the outside world wondered at his disappearance. At the emperor's direction, a search was underway for the voice that was no longer heard in sweet song, no longer lightening their burdens. John meditated, prayed, herded his sheep, and drew even closer to God. One day, while rounding up a stray sheep, he came upon a shrine of the Virgin Mary, to whom Mount Athos is dedicated. Out of a deep reverence, he burst into a beautiful song of praise. By the time he had finished, there wasn't a monk within hearing range who had not stopped to stand and listen. Soon he was singing the liturgies and with such purity that the reputation he had sought to bury now revealed his true identity, for there was no man who could sing like John. The emperor was pleased to have found his favourite vocalist, and instead of showing offence, as John had feared, he said he would be delighted to have John return to even greater acclaim. Yet John preferred to remain at the Great Lavra. The abbot of the monastery journeyed to Constantinople to ask that John be permitted to remain a monk. Permission was granted, and after building a small chapel dedicated to the archangels, John lived in piety and song until his death. His chapel has been the site of many miraculous workings of the Lord. Saint John of Albania is remembered by the Church on October the 1st.